hope that you've been enjoying World Kitchen as much as I have. It has just been great to hear people's experiences in different countries, to get a recipe and ingredients and be able to cook a dish from that country. And then also, and maybe the most important part of it, is to learn about what the Presbyterian Church USA is doing in mission in those countries. We have had incredible responses from the different workers who are in those countries, and it's been wonderful. I can tell you one thing that I remember so much is that when we did Haiti, I picked up the ingredients, I followed the instructions, and it tasted just like the rice and beans when we were in Haiti. And so it was a real joy to be taken back in that way. So these recipes and ingredients are authentic, just like the stories and the work that we talk of. I hope you'll join us for the next episodes of The World Kitchen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joan Romaine, a member of the Mission and Social Action Committee. This month, our World Kitchen project looks at the work of the Presbyterian Church USA in the United Kingdom. The Presbyterian Church USA supports efforts for renewal, reconciliation, service, and ecumenical cooperation in the United Kingdom through partner churches and organizations, and through our mission personnel in Northern Ireland and Wales. The United Kingdom is one of the international sites for the Presbyterian Church USA Young Adult Volunteer Program. In Great Britain, young adult volunteers serve through a program called Time for God, a volunteer agency which is now one of the most established ecumenical Christian volunteering organizations in the United Kingdom. Volunteers are placed into local communities where they will live and work for a year, serving in churches, hostels, youth activity centers, and working with the elderly. In Northern Ireland, the Presbyterian Church USA partner churches and organizations and Presbyterian Church USA mission personnel are particularly involved in reconciliation efforts, as there continues to be movement out of conflict and toward a positively shared future.
Well, we are going to prepare our own authentic Scotch pies. And the way to do that is to start with the crust. Now, some people might like to make their own crust, and you are certainly welcome to do that. I, on the other hand, am quite fond of rolled up dough. So, this is totally fine. This is how I make them. Do not feel like you have to invest the time in making your own crust. So I like these rolled up ones because they are very soft. They can get very soft, which makes them easier to get into pans. And so I'm just going to roll mine out. I might put a little bit of flour down just so it doesn't stick, but just a little bit. And I'm going to roll it out. Now my pan, which hopefully you will have a pan like this, will be about this size. We call this a 5-inch pan, and you probably recognize them as being pot pie pans. They're not the traditional shape of a Scottish pie, but that's okay because we have a way to making that. But first you want to make it so that you can fit the crust in there. So it's easy just to flip it over and then just to take a knife. And I like to cut a little extra. So I'm going to actually cut around the edge of that pan just by about a 1/2 inch. There is the part that's going to fit into our pan. Okay, I'm just going to peel this part back. That's going to go right into my pan, just like that. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and push that in for now so I can set it aside. See, if you use your hand and just push it right down, it already goes right in there. Now, I think you would not want to press this to the side yet, okay? Because we're actually going to make this into a different shape. But I'm going to set it aside and finish this part first. The other thing I'm going to need for my Scottish pie is a top. And my top is actually going to fit right inside of here, not on the outside. So I'm going to take another one of my pans. There's another pan. And this time I'm going to trace around the bottom. That'll work because once I put my meat and onion mixture in here, I'm going to put this right over the top. So this will work. Now, the last thing I want to do with this pie is I want to make it stand up to be more like a, I don't know, straight-sided pie. Maybe a straight-sided pie. So these little folds that are in there, normally you would push them against the side. Well, I'm going to pinch them together so that what I'm making is like a pie that has straight sides. You wouldn't have to do this. You could mold your pie, your Scottish pie, to your pan, and that would be fine. But I'm just trying to show you what an authentic pie would look like. And those ones are more straight up and down sides. And the reason being is because it's a little easier to hold it in your hand that way. And these are really little hand pies. And people would throw these in their lunch boxes. So kids would take them to school, and working people mostly would just take them to work so that you can just hold it in your hand and eat them. Yep. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this whole thing, just like that, into the refrigerator because I want it to be nice and stiff. And now we're going to start cooking the other parts. Okay, so now we're ready to do our next step, which is cutting up an onion. And they say in the recipe that it needs to be finely cut. So you can cut it as finely as you like. I actually like my onion to be a little bit bigger, so I like to be able to taste it. And once you've diced it, you're going to put it all in a bowl. And then we're going to work on our spices. Now, none of the spices are really unusual spices, I don't think. Probably all things that you have in your cupboard. So what they want us to do is to come up with a teaspoonful of a mixture of spices. So I'm actually going to mix those 4 spices right here into this bowl. So I'm going to put a little bit of oregano in. I'm trying to make about a teaspoon of the mixture. So I'm putting some oregano in and some of this in, margarine. I'm gonna sprinkle some of that in there. I don't use this very often, and then I have some rosemary, which is an optional one, but I love rosemary, so I'm gonna put some of that in, and then I'm gonna put some basil in. Okay, so then I have a pretty good mixture here of those 4 spices. I'm gonna mix them around. And then see if that comes up to about a teaspoon. I think it will be just almost exactly a teaspoon, not quite, but maybe a little more. So knowing that, I'm just going to toss the whole lot right in there and mix it around really good. Now there's one other spice they would like us to add, and they want you to add that one separately. So that spice is nutmeg. And I'll tell you, the nutmeg really makes a big difference in the taste of these pies. And then you're going to mix that all together like that. And then the last thing they want you to add to your onions is a tablespoon or 2 of beef broth. So I just made some beef broth here, and I'm going to measure in a tablespoon to start. And actually, I think I'll put a couple in. Now, you don't want to put a lot in. Mostly what you're trying to do is make a paste when you start cooking this on the stove. You don't want these pies to be very runny, and so very little liquid is being used at all in the stuffing of the pie. So that's about it. You may add a couple more drops of liquid once we get it all mixed together. Now this is going to go on the stove and we're going to cook it for just a few minutes. Well, the onions are done. I just cooked them up for about 5 minutes till they were translucent, and all the spices are on there, and oh, I gotta tell you, it smells great. So I have those, and I still have my liquid, okay? And now I'm just going to bring my bowl of meat over, and I have already spent a little time sort of banging this around. That's probably not the right word for it, but kind of breaking it up. It is not cooked. That is an essential thing to know. It's not cooked. And the recipe does recommend that you use a hamburger that's got about 80%, so it has a fairly high fat content. I think the reason for that is that is going to be your liquid, and that is what's going to kind of hold it together. Again, you don't want to add much liquid if you're using an 80% hamburger, okay? So I'm going to just take my onions and add them right in there, just like that. Great. And then I'm just going to spend a minute or two kind of stirring them together so they're all mixed together. Now, traditional Scotch pie was made mostly with lamb meat. I have noticed that you can get lamb. If you really want to use lamb, you can. Now, we are going to put this into crust now. I'm going to set these things aside. Oh, I better talk about the liquid a little bit. So I feel as if this has got a little bit of moisture in it already. It's kind of sticking together. So I am not going to add any more liquid. But if you feel like yours is really dry, you could add just a little bit more. But honestly, you want it to be as dry as possible because the grease will cook out of it and firm it together, and it will not make your crust soggy. And that's key. You don't want a soggy crust on this. So let me set this aside and bring my little pie back. There it is with its little up and down sides. Okay. Now I'm going to take about a couple big spoonfuls, and put those in. This particular recipe should make 4 little Scotch pies with the pound of meat and the onions. And if you buy a box of these roll-up crusts, there's 2 of them in there, and you can easily make 4 of these little pies with those 2 crusts. So it's not a recipe that takes a lot. So I'm going to put about 1/4, if I can kind of measure what about 1/4 is, and I'm kind of pushing it down. I want this to be nice and solid. So I'm pressing it down. You know how you kind of do that with brown sugar? You want it to be really solid. That's what I'm doing with this too. I'm pressing it down until I get to about 1/2 to 3/4 inch from the top. And then I am going to take my other piece. Now remember, I took this out of the fridge, so it's pretty cold and nice and sturdy. And that's how this is too. It's easy to hold, it's not sticking to me. And I'm gonna put that in there. But as I can see, that's just still a little bit big. So I'm just gonna trim it a little bit. And it's okay if you even end up trimming it too much and it's not, say, exactly round. There we go. I trimmed it a little bit, and then I feel like it's going to fit in there a little better because I kind of want it just to fit right inside there, and even to overlap just a little bit, just like that, right? See how it kind of goes up on the edges? That's how you want it. You want it to be pretty firm and stuck in there. This is something you can do, you don't have to do. You can take a little water and try to press it together, but you know, when you start fussing with it that much, it can also lose its shape. So I'm going to do a little bit of that because I kind of want to seal that, but you don't have to seal it. It does not have to be completely sealed. But that's your little pie. That's your little Scottish pie. The only other thing you're going to do is cut a couple of little slices in there so that it can breathe. And that is all you have to do. And then we're going to bake it. And we're going to put it on a plate with another traditional food dish from Scotland, and we are going to enjoy our Scottish pie. Well, there you have it, our little Scotch pie. This I actually just took out of the oven, so it smells wonderful, but it's kind of leaning over. I love to eat them hot because that's, makes a wonderful meal. But you can also just refrigerate it, and it would be a much harder thing. You could just hold it in your hand. So in Scotland, they've been eating these Scotch pies, this kind of traditional recipe, for 500 or 600 years. Yeah, and there are the same kind of pies. You would find some in England and in Ireland too, but a Scotch pie is made this way. You would find in Ireland they would use more potatoes because that's something that they had a lot of. In England you would find that they would use a lot more gravy, and it wouldn't be this shape. It would be more of a curved shape that you could hold. I also have some mushy peas on my plate. Now, I didn't really give you a recipe for that, but it's very simple. You can just take frozen peas and cook them until they're pretty much done, and then you just take a fork or a potato masher and you can just mash them with a little salt. And that's also a very traditional dish that goes with Scotch pies, is mushy peas. So enjoy, and I hope you have fun making these, because it is fun just to make the little pie itself.